Uh, Hello, Unnamed Adventurers Guild. I'm one of the head dungeon masters, Alex Newton, and today I would kind of I would like to make a public announcement to the entire group, as well as the Unnamed Adventurers Guild as a whole, partially. First, I'm going to be talking to the other DMs and potential players that may be keeping an eye on the chaos levels that are surrounding the place. For now, let's start with the immediate thing, which is the expanding chaos. As many archmages and as many DMs know and may have this map, the chaos is pretty much everywhere. And I've posted a new map for the DMs that will have new locations for the chaos portals to be opening up, or altars, or whatever may be creating these zones. Even I'm not 100% sure about what exactly goes on in this world when it comes to the chaos. I'm assuming it's portals. Portals. But just looking at this map, there is going to be an extra ring that is going to be at least 2 to 3 days wider than it's already been. And of course, overlap will create new 100% zones, and the new rings will be the new 50%, and then the next ring will be 75%, and so on and so forth until it hits, obviously, the centers. Now, this is going to be something that I'm going to have other DMs handle, as of course there is going to be a lot of I'm going to have to sit down, and we're going to have to talk about this in hopefully a DM meeting sometime soon. This is going to be kind of big because, of course, it's going to affect all the spellcasters in the realm. It's going to affect even more people than it already did. And I'm sorry to say this, if you're a spellcaster, it's going to be tough. But it's not all gloom and doom for all of you, at least not right away. So, with that, is mostly aimed towards DMs. We're going to need to sit down and figure out where these new chaos zones are going to open up. I've delivered a map already where I want at least 2 more to be around, but I'm also hoping that we expand the rings as well, as it's been nearly a couple of years now, and I don't think the Darzanon and the Dark Queen are going to be sitting idly by while we are collecting these artifacts. And of course, that brings us to the other topics, which is the balance part of this video. Now, some of you may not be aware of this, that this sort of balance has been created and has been actively used by high-ranking members of the guild to allow casters and as well as negate chaos effects from particular items and as well as chaos zones in general, allowing casters to act freely in the area around it. And of course, that's all well and good for adventures, and it is a powerful weapon in its own right. However, that doesn't solve the issue that only one person can be carrying at a time. And this is where I bring in the major news, is that the scales of balance, and I think it's the scales and the crossbar of the scales of balance have been found and is being held by the archmages Adrin and Jebediah. However, there's still, I think, 1 or 2 pieces that still needs to be collected before we can truly combat the chaos zones. When the balance is formed, or when the scales are formed, then that is when the chaos zones are supposed to cease. But I'm not sure if that kills the portals. So we'll have to see in future news about the Chaos Realms. Now for something a little bit different and also incredibly good for you mages out there. Now, obviously, the Chaos Zones are kind of a bitch. You are obviously struggling to do any zones in your public area, and of course, any of the major cities, which is really the only safe place to be at this moment. You can't really defend yourselves from, and perhaps you're a victim of crime or something like along those lines because your main defense and offense is stripped from you, or you've probably summoned some things on you, or you turn blue or transparent, or you summoned a bunch of wolves on you, or you've gotten extra help, or you paralyzed yourself, whatever the case may be. Now, to balance out the abrupt chaos that is actually happening in the realm, the gods of law and order are not going to leave this plane to get overwhelmed by Darzanon and his forces. And as such, though they cannot act directly like Darzanon can, they are going to create some crystals. And essentially is one crystal per god that is kind of keeping an eye on this, which is 12 of them, based around law and order. And they are going to create these shards. Though shards is a pretty inaccurate term when it comes to how big they actually are. When they will streak from the sky, and 12 of them will land in each country or continent or island. And they have one singular purpose, which is to negate the chaos zones around them and allow casting and magic to slowly be tethered together at last, as it should. However, this is where their size comes into play, as these things weigh anywhere between 80 to 150 pounds. So these things can be incredibly large and uh, incredibly heavy. And they are about as tall as a regular person. So in order for any mage to really benefit from them, they have to be carrying one almost solely by themselves. Though it doesn't, it does have the perk of allowing you to cast spells and anyone else within 10 feet of you to cast spells. Now these things are large. They're shiny, but their purpose is singular and they don't do anything else. The downside of these things is that although they're not fragile, they become inert when they're broken. Though that will be a difficult task in itself. These crystals are resistant to pretty much everything outside of necrotic damage. Their armor class is 18, and on top of all that, they have 200 hit points. So, and when they aren't completely broken, they do recover hit points normally through resting and recovery. They can't be turned off, so they will always shine when they're on, and they will always emit their aura. And of course, this creates a bit of a dichotomy because it makes them very incredibly valuable to any wizard who possesses one. Now, there's a lot of them, but not enough to really satisfy every group of wizards holding them. So this will create a bit of a magical battleground, unfortunately. Though, for your adventures, you'll be able to use this, as some farmer is going to come across this He's going to hand this to the Wizards Guild for Adrian and Jebediah to take a look at. They crash land in his farmland, and all he asks is for 100 gold to repay for the damages that cost it to land in their yard and their farm. So, Jebediah and Adrian, if either one of you want to take the hit, go for it. Wink, wink. So these things are large and bulky, and if you don't have to be holding it to invoke their power, you can leave them lying on the ground or in a cart. The only rule is that they have to be exposed to the outside. So you can't put them in a bag, you can't put them in a chest, you can't put them in a bag of holding. You can put them in a cart, but if you put them in a wagon where they have the canvas tops on them, then it will also fail. So you can't put them in a box or anything. As soon as you seal them up, their zone shrinks down to their container. So these things are very obvious, and stealth with them is incredibly impossible. And hopefully, if chaos magic didn't affect so many things, I would say that there would be alternatives to them, and there are. And I'll give you some alternatives in the meantime, after I finish kind of closing this section off. So, which is actually pretty soon. So, to summarize everything in a TLDR, or too long to listen would be more accurate, chaos magic is expanding, and new 100% zones are going to exist, as well as new chaos zones, and entirely new portals. Of course, there is the Sword of Balance, which high-level members are using. Not everyone has access to it, and is protected by a group of craftsmen that belong to the guild. So stealing it is incredibly difficult, and nobody's been really able to pull it off, and no wizards can rightly cast spells towards them unless they get into the zone. And of course, they just will probably get pummeled. So it is a heavily protected object. And of course, progress on the scales of balance is giving everyone hope that the chaos will soon end. But the object's not complete yet. You still have another half of the scales to continue, which is the bar that holds up the crossbar and the scales, as well as the base. And finally, but not last nor least, are these blue crystals that are the current answer to casters around the world who are struggling to defend themselves and to aid in the cause of facing off against chaos again. Again, these things are resistant to all damage except necrotic. They have 200 hit points, 18 AC, and they emit a zone of 10 feet that allows you to cast spells without a hindrance. However, they are large. They require you to carry them, whether strapped onto your back or in your arms. They weigh anywhere between 80 to 150 pounds. So, for simplicity's sake, we'll just say that they all weigh 125 pounds, which is heavier than most people would expect. And they are quite large, almost as tall as a regular human, so you can't really hide them. And containing them in a container will shrink their zones down to their containment size. And they shine brightly in the dark and during the day. So you can't hide them very well, even if you have them in the open or paint them. They will still emit this blue shine that will be recognized by pretty much anyone who sees them. So now we got those topics out of the way. I know that a lot of people are kind of upset with the magical community and the difficulty of obtaining new items, as well as casting spells and the like. And of course, I don't blame you. They are very difficult to use, and they are hard to really get by. Though there is very specific details about chaos that makes it impossible for you to even use scrolls. There is an alternative source that you can use, which is often overlooked in the crafting scene because 5e doesn't really cover it very well. And I would like to cover it here. And this is up for debate. So if there are any DMs listening in on this announcement, perhaps offer this as a solution to players. I'm going to suggest it here, and I will have DMs and players alike hopefully comment on it, bring it out. And if everyone likes the idea and everyone thinks it's fair and usable, then by all means use it. And maybe I'll make another public announcement for, or maybe just another something else for it, so that you can have something else instead of the chaos. Because I know spellcasters, you're not always going to have your hands on this crystal, and maybe somebody sets off on a campaign with it, and you're just stuck without having anything. So I'll return to the other map. So as we know, there are still huge gaps in the chaos zones, even with the expansions, even with the additional portals. Now, the biggest and most notable one that is obvious in here is the Steel Kingdom and Lankwood. Now, this map is still not updated, but this is mostly for players, so you haven't heard anything from Lankwood yet, or the Steel Kingdom. But the Steel Kingdom has a pretty tedious magical ban right now. Well, not really a ban, more of just you could get arrested over it, essentially. It's not illegal, but if you get executed, it's really not their it's not their problem. That's pretty much how they see it. Though obviously with the rise of chaos, people are trying to sneak in through their borders now, and they have tight borders, and they won't stop you if you're a mage, but you have to keep your magic kind of a secret when you go there. But the possible, now this is where I want the DMs and the players to kind of give me their input and open up to this suggestion that I'm about to do here. In the previous game that I did for the chaos, I introduced the idea of using potions instead of scrolls. Now, the difference between, and this is kind of invoking the rules of older editions, 3.5, 2.0, Pathfinder, which is a completely different game, but still same concept. And essentially is you cast complete spells into liquids, and it's potions, and you throw them or drink them to activate their effects. And of course, the throne table is going to be used similar to that of holy water, so you can really only throw it 20 feet, maybe 60 feet at disadvantage. And so offensive potential is pretty limited. It's not going to have the same range as it usually does. And of course, certain spells are going to be a little confusing to kind of make out. So for simplicity's sake, try to use simpler spells. But I'll give you a few examples to run with, and we'll see. So let me give you guys a few examples and what I have an idea for. Potions are going to function almost entirely like scrolls in that regard. Now there are some few notes here, which is unlike scrolls where you can kind of adjust what kind of type you're going to use, like for example, chromatic orb. If you want to use it as a fire spell, you can change it during the scroll. Now, for potions, it's not going to be the same. You have to decide what the potion is while you're making it. So you can't just throw it and declare that it's a cold type. You have to know the type before you throw it. So there's that. And of course, this does go for cure wound spells if you need to. So I know there is healing potions, and I actually can talk about this now. as everyone seems to think that healing potions is a magical item, and that is the case, that it is considered a magical item. Then in 5th edition, those healing potions, although are considered magical items, they are created using mundane methods. So remember that when you're creating potions for potentially healing, um, that chaos magic does not affect them at all in the same way that they do for other spells. Now, returning back to magic at hand, if you are using cure wound spells or lesser restoration spells for these creations, they will still go by what spell slot you use them at and what kind of spell level that you use them. So, and of course, it will require you to write their details down fairly thoroughly because it will change between casters. So it will function completely as if you had cast the spell, as if the person creating the spell had cast it. So if you get a high level cleric who might be really wise to cast a cure wounds on a potion that might heal 2d8 plus 4, if you drink it, it won't lower it down. It's obviously not going to use your spell slots. But if you have a higher wisdom, then you will still have to use that wisdom score that he made when he made it. There's also you will have to use the creator's spell DC. So the spell will change based on the potion's types, and of course that will work pretty much regardless. Again, they work almost precisely the same way as scrolls, using the creator's DC rather than the person using it. And of course, if of course most scrolls use your own, but for the sake of potions, because they are pre-cast spells and they are designated and designed before they are put inside, they will have the difference of being their creators' DCs. Does this create some sort of disparity between high levels and low levels? Potentially, but the imbalance typically comes at the end of the higher level characters, because then they will have to pay more gold to boost up those spells to give to lowbies, and then they will be losing gold. So that is the big difference between the scrolls and the potions. And of course, that requires a lot more note taking on everyone else's part, especially for alchemists who are enthusiastic about making new potions. And of course, you could create wands in the same way as well. So, wands, of course, using the spell, the caster's DCs, and the caster's abilities. For example, of course, you'd have to put only the base spell. You couldn't put any empowerments or anything like that in it. And so those are my suggestions for characters who are interested in item creation but don't know where to go, and mages who are looking for some sort of alternative but not trading in their versatility. And as much as I like to say that the chaos is cured, it's not going to be cured, and I don't know when it will be cured. So this might be an option that if the DMs and of course you players like the idea of, then you can go to the Steel Kingdom. Of course, you're going to have to kind of find a hovel and kind of live a degraded life for a little while, but you'll be able to create potions, healing spells, fireballs, whatever you want. And of course, I kind of skipped over the part where there are some spells that require directionality, such as like Burning Hands and Cone of Cold. Those spells will essentially just function as if you were throwing them in the direction, and the explosion or the cones will go in the direction that you're aiming for. The only exception to there's only a few rules that will apply to pretty much negate certain spells. Essentially, ray spells will work exactly the way as intended, except for spells with multiple rays. So if you want to hit somebody with a ray of enfeeblement, for example, and you throw the potion and it smashes into them, they it will still work normally. So they hits them, they get enfeebled. However, spells like Scorching Ray that shoots multiple rays, even if you hit them at higher level, if you hit one, it's only going to do the one ray because it can't shoot off multiple rays. It can only do one boom. So, with that in mind, I'm going to end this broadcast. So I hopefully this wasn't too long-winded for everyone to keep track with. Hopefully the suggestions and this information helps you kind of catch up. Maybe I'll do a bit of a gossip one later on, but I'll wait until the in-game year is over. So thank you for listening up until this point, and good, uh, great gaming. Have fun out there, and stay safe. And